That night Bob Dylan was singing his third song when he heard the name. His fingers froze on the guitar strings. 38 years. No one had spoken that name in 38 years. The venue was small. Maybe 250 seats. A converted theater in upstate New York that still smelled like old wood and decades of cigarette smoke worked into the walls. The kind of place Dylan preferred now. Intimate rooms where he could see faces, where the music felt like conversation rather than broadcast. It was October 1987. Dylan was 56 years old. He'd been touring for what felt like forever, playing the same songs in slightly different arrangements, watching audiences that ranged from reverent silence to polite applause to the occasional walking out. He'd made peace with it. This was the work. Show up. Play. Leave. The mystique was someone else's problem. Tonight had been unremarkable. He'd opened with a slow version of Masters of War. Moved into Girl from the North Country. The audience was attentive but not ecstatic. A Tuesday night crowd. People who came because they remembered when Dylan mattered, or thought they did. He was 3 verses into Don't Think Twice, It's All Right, when the voice came from the back row. Not loud. Not shouting. Just clear enough to cut through the quiet between guitar notes. Samuel. Dylan's fingers stopped moving. The chord hung in the air, unresolved. His right hand hovered above the strings like he'd forgotten what they were for. The audience noticed immediately. That sudden absence of sound. Dylan mid-song was supposed to be steady, unpredictable in arrangement maybe, but steady. This wasn't steady. This was stopped. Dylan looked up from his guitar. His eyes moved past the front rows, past the middle section, all the way to the back where the house lights barely reached. Searching for whoever had spoken. The venue manager in the wings tensed. The sound engineer reached for the monitor controls. Something was wrong. Dylan's mouth opened slightly. He didn't speak. He just stood there, fingers still frozen on the fretboard, staring into the darkness at the back of the theater. Dylan didn't explain himself. He never did. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened in 1949. Bob Dylan wasn't Bob Dylan then. He was Robert Zimmerman, 8 years old, living in Hibbing, Minnesota. Small mining town. Cold winters. Families who worked hard and expected their kids to do the same. Robert had an older brother. Not by blood, by circumstance. Samuel Adler, the son of their next-door neighbors. Samuel was 12, 4 years older than Robert, and for reasons no one quite understood, he decided that this quiet, strange little Zimmerman kid was worth his time. Samuel played harmonica. Not well, but with enthusiasm. He'd sit on his family's porch on summer evenings and play folk songs his grandfather had taught him, old labor songs, protest songs, melodies that came from somewhere deeper than radio. Robert would sit on his own porch, one house over, and listen. Just listen. His parents didn't understand the appeal. It's the same 3 songs every night, his mother would say. But Robert heard something in those repetitions. Something about the way Samuel bent notes, the way silence mattered as much as sound. One evening in July 1949, Samuel called over to him. "Hey, Zimmerman. You just gonna sit there or you gonna learn something?" Robert walked over. Samuel handed him a harmonica, a battered Hohner with half the reeds probably shot. "Blow here. Not hard. Gentle. Like you're telling a secret." Robert tried. It sounded awful. Samuel laughed, not meanly. Again. Softer. For the rest of that summer, every evening, Samuel taught Robert how to play harmonica. Not formally. Not with lessons or theory. Just by playing together on that porch while the sun went down and the mining town settled into night. "Music isn't about being good," Samuel told him once. "It's about being honest. You play what's true and people will hear it. Maybe not everyone, but the ones who need to." Robert, who would become Bob Dylan, never forgot that. The idea that music was about truth rather than skill. That you could be rough and unpolished, and still say something that mattered. In August 1949, Samuel's family moved. His father got a job in Chicago. Better pay. Better opportunities. The kind of move mining families made when they could. Samuel gave Robert the harmonica. Keep practicing. And remember, when you play, you're talking to someone. Even if you don't know who yet. They promised to write. They didn't. Samuel was 12 and busy with a new city. Robert was 8 and didn't know what to say in letters. The friendship faded the way childhood friendships do when distance gets involved. Robert heard, years later, that Samuel had joined the army. Then that he'd been sent to Korea. Then nothing. The kind of silence that families in the 1950s learned to carry quietly. In 1961, when Robert Zimmerman became Bob Dylan and started playing folk clubs in Greenwich Village, he thought about Samuel sometimes. Wondered if he was still alive. Wondered if he'd recognize the sound Dylan was making, that rough, honest, unpolished truth they practiced on a porch in Hibbing. Dylan never spoke about Samuel publicly. Not in interviews. Not in songs. Not in the autobiography he'd eventually write. Some things were too foundational to explain. The harmonica in his pocket at every performance was the same one Samuel had given him, though he never told anyone that either. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most important part of this story is still unfolding. Now it was 1987. 38 years since that summer on the porch. Dylan standing on stage in upstate New York, frozen mid-song because someone in the back row had spoken a name he hadn't heard in nearly 4 decades. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. The audience was getting uncomfortable. People shifted in their seats. Someone coughed. Dylan slowly lowered his guitar. Not setting it down, just letting it hang from the strap, his hands falling to his sides. He stepped away from the microphone. Who said that? His voice was quiet, but it carried through the venue. Who just said that name? No response from the back row. Just darkness, and the faint outlines of faces too far away to read. Dylan walked forward, closer to the edge of the stage. The house lights were dim, but he squinted into the back section anyway. Samuel, he said, testing the name himself, like maybe he'd misheard. Someone just said Samuel. A figure stood up in the back row. Slowly. An older man, hard to tell much more than that from the stage. He didn't speak. Just stood there. Dylan stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned to his sound engineer in the wings. Bring up the house lights. I need to see. The engineer hesitated. House lights during a performance wasn't protocol. But something in Dylan's voice left no room for argument. The lights came up gradually, revealing the audience fully for the first time that night. The man in the back row was in his 60s, maybe. Gray hair. Worn jacket. He held something in his hands. Dylan couldn't see what from this distance. His face was weathered, but his eyes were steady, locked on Dylan. Come here, Dylan said. Not an order. A request. Almost gentle. The man didn't move. I didn't mean to interrupt, he said, his voice carrying now that the room was quiet. I wanted you to know I was here. Come here, Dylan repeated more firmly this time. The man hesitated, then started making his way down the aisle. The audience parted instinctively, not sure what they were witnessing but understanding it mattered. Each step the man took seemed to carry weight, not hesitation exactly, but the gravity of years. When he reached the front, Dylan crouched down at the edge of the stage. Eye level. The man was close enough now that Dylan could see his face properly. It wasn't Samuel Adler. Of course it wasn't. Samuel was dead. Dylan had learned that much in the 1970s when he'd finally asked someone to look into it. Killed in Korea, 1951. 20 years old. Never made it home. But the man's eyes. Something about them. Who are you? Dylan asked quietly. David Adler, the man said. Samuel was my brother." Away from the spotlight, Dylan made a choice no one expected. The audience was completely silent now. Even the sound engineer had stopped moving. 250 people watching Bob Dylan crouch on a stage talking to a stranger who just identified himself as the brother of someone no one there had ever heard of. Dylan's jaw tightened. He looked down at his hands, then back at David. "Your brother taught me how to play harmonica. Hibbing, 1949. I was 8 years old." David nodded. "I know. He wrote me letters from Korea. Talked about you. About this kid next door who he'd taught to play. He said you had something. Said you were going to do something important with music. He died in Korea. Chosin Reservoir. November 1950. David's voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly around whatever he was holding. "He was 19 when he shipped out. 20 when he died." Dylan closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. Not crying, not yet, but the edge of it. "Why are you here?" David held up what he'd been carrying. A harmonica. Old. Battered. This was his. The one he kept. "He had two, gave you one, kept one. I've been carrying it for 37 years. And I've been looking for you for almost as long." "Looking for me?" "He made me promise something before he left for Korea. He was scared. He didn't say it, but I could tell. He gave me this harmonica and he said, if something happens to me, find Robert Zimmerman. Tell him to keep playing. Tell him that what we practiced on that porch mattered. Tell him not to stop." Dylan's hands gripped the edge of the stage. "I didn't stop. I know. I'd been watching. Listening. I saw you in New York in the 60s. Chicago in the 70s. I never approached you because I didn't know what to say. How do you walk up to someone who became Bob Dylan and say, 'My dead brother wanted you to know he believed in you'? You just did." David smiled faintly. "Took me 38 years to find the courage. I saw you were playing here tonight, and I thought if I didn't do it now, I never would. So I bought a ticket. Sat in the back. Told myself I'd just watch. Just be here. But when you started playing Don't Think Twice, that was one of Samuel's favorites. And his name came out." Dylan stared at the harmonica in David's hands. The same model as the one in his pocket. The twin. The other half of that summer in 1949. "Can I see it?" David handed it up. Dylan took it carefully, like it might dissolve. He turned it over in his hands, running his thumb across the worn metal, the smoothed wood. There were initials carved into the back, S.A. Samuel Adler. Dylan pulled his own harmonica from his pocket. The one Samuel had given him 38 years ago. He held them side by side. Identical except for age and wear. A matched pair, separated by death and time and the distance between a mining town porch and everywhere Bob Dylan had traveled since. What followed stayed with everyone who witnessed it, long after the sound faded. Dylan stood up slowly, both harmonicas in his hands. He looked out at the audience, all of them watching, none of them understanding fully but all of them sensing they were present for something unrepeatable. "This concert is over," Dylan said simply. The venue manager started to move from the wings, but Dylan raised one hand. "Wait." He lifted both harmonicas to his lips, Samuel's and his own, held together. He played the first melody Samuel had ever taught him on that porch in Hibbing. Simple. 3 notes repeating. The kind of thing an 8-year-old could learn. But now it carried 38 years of distance. War. Death. Fame. Everything that had happened since 2 boys sat on neighboring porches in a mining town. When the last note faded, Dylan handed Samuel's harmonica back to David. "Keep it," David said. "He'd want you to have it." Dylan shook his head. "You kept his promise. That's enough. This one stays with you." He helped David back to his seat. Then he walked off stage without another word. No encore. No explanation. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. David Adler attended 17 more Dylan concerts before he died in 1994. He always sat in the back row. Dylan always knew he was there. The harmonica Dylan had carried since 1949 is now in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The placard reads, "Gift from Samuel Adler, 1949. Samuel's harmonica stayed with David's family. At his funeral, they played a recording of that night, the 3 notes Dylan played. Both harmonicas together. Finally,